No one was safe from Mary's purges. Just possessing a copy of the Bible in English meant you could be burnt alive. Paranoid and terrified people betrayed their neighbours and even their own families. The executions took place in town squares all over England. The average person in Mary's England was pretty used to the idea of people being burnt at the stake. It had been going on for 150 years after all. There's usually a big crowd there, lots of children running around, cherry sellers going about their business. Most people considered it a jolly good day out. Hello? Right. Well, here we are. This is our Porky, our heretic, and this is Paul, our heretic burning expert. Now, what have you got here?
It's very thin, twiggy bits of stick. You know, they would have used brushwood originally, or straw, or reeds, or something like that. But generally, it's got to be small wood.
So the construction of the fire is quite crucial.
It is crucial, yeah. Obviously, the executioner wanted to get it right, and it would have reflected badly on him if the poor person had been just toasted a bit and not finished off quickly.
Did that happen? Did fires go out?
It did happen quite regularly, yes. There was one account I read where the fire went out, and the poor chap was left there while they sent a horse off to get more firewood. And it took 3 attempts to finish the poor chap
hurry up,
off.
I'm freezing.
Well, I don't think he said that.
And what's the bag that's tied around the neck here?
Well, this is a bag of gunpowder. This would be given to the victim by their family. They would then tie it around their neck or put it under their arms or between their legs. The idea being was when the flames reached it, this bag would explode, blowing them to smithereens and hastening their demise. Unfortunately, it doesn't work. Because what a lot of people don't realise now, and certainly didn't then, was that gunpowder isn't a high explosive. It's only when you contain it in a vessel that it will actually explode. So really all this would achieve was causing them horrific burns, really, and just adding to their suffering, really.
Especially if it was between your legs, I'd have thought.
Yeah, it would be rather nasty, I would imagine.
It's a strange sort of age, isn't it, when your loved ones tie a bag of gunpowder around you.
Well, I mean, they honestly thought
as a gesture of kindness.
They honestly thought they were doing them a favour.
So what's the ideal sort of weather?
Probably as we've got it today, actually. The wood's nice and dry. We've got absolutely no wind.
That's right.
So all the heat's going to go straight up.
Well, I think we should light it then.
I think we should.
Lunch. This is what the crowds were waiting for. The moment the flames were lit, everybody would jostle to get a better view. Of course, the best seats were reserved for the most important townsfolk. All right, well, I've retired to a safe distance to enjoy the afternoon's entertainment with the local dignitaries. Now, Chris, you're a forensic pathologist. What can you tell me about human flesh burning?
Human flesh will burn very well. The first thing that happens is that the skin goes red as the heat hits it. Then it will char. After that, the muscle starts to cook. Obviously, the fat itself will turn to liquid and will actually fuel the fire. There is blood in the body that will boil, and it will actually turn to something that resembles black pudding. Indeed, of course, that's what black pudding is. The rib cage will become visible, and you will be able to see the organs of the chest through the rib cage. You can see the heart and the lungs, which are cooking.
I mean, it's going to sound like a stupid question, but I mean, was it very painful?
Well, it would be painful to start with, as the skin was burnt. That's where the pain receptors are. Ironically, as it goes deeper into the tissue, then the pain receptors are destroyed.
Oh, right.
And it would then, for that area, it would become less painful. But of course, the flames would be moving up the body, and each area would become more painful.
Yeah, and you have got some sensitive areas.
You've got some very sensitive areas as you get further up.
Right, there goes the gunpowder at 12 minutes. What effect has that had on the body?
What has actually happened is, in this case, it's really just burnt around the face of poor old Porky.
Yeah. It's charred it and made it a bit sooty, hasn't it?
It has, you can see that quite clearly. But what it hasn't done is done any major damage that would have actually either rendered the person unconscious or preferably killed them.
Yeah. At what point do you die just from burning? Do we know that?
Well, it's very difficult to say with certainty. Some of them may have died very quickly. Some people may have died because as they are consumed by a rapid fire, they actually go into heart failure. They have inhaled smoke, the throat will be burnt and it may swell up, and then you may not be able to breathe properly, so you may get a sensation of suffocating. Some of these old bishops would be probably dying quite quickly in comparison with younger heretics.
It looks pretty dead to me now.
Yes, it's we are beginning to cremate that pig, I think.
So we've missed our opportunity to nip in and get a spare rib.
I think we have.
The first high-profile heretic Mary sent to the stake was the Bishop of Gloucester, John Hooper. 7,000 people gathered to watch his horrific execution. The authorities hadn't spent enough money on wood, and the fire was weak. Hooper burned slowly. He prayed until his mouth turned black, his tongue was so swollen that he couldn't speak, and his legs and arms had burnt away. After 45 minutes of agony, he finally lost consciousness and died. It wasn't just bishops like Hooper who were dying like this. It was anybody. Farm labourers, tailors, hat makers, no estate agents, sadly. What Mary just couldn't understand was that her message simply wasn't getting through. There seemed to be an endless stream of people prepared to die for their beliefs. And the longer the fires burned, the more people started showing sympathy for the victims, even though Mary had outlawed this. But Mary had one thing up her sleeve, which she hoped would scare her people into submission. It was her prized prisoner, the former Archbishop of Canterbury, Thomas Cranmer. Cranmer had served Henry VIII and had been the brains behind turning England Protestant. Mary despised him. Despite the fact that he was much loved by the people, she was determined to see him burn. Mary had Cranmer imprisoned in Oxford, a Catholic, conservative city, a safe place to keep such a controversial prisoner. It was in Oxford that she'd also burned Bishops Latimer and Ridley, on this very spot, overlooked by Cranmer's prison. In fact, Cranmer was forced to watch his friends burn from the window of his cell. It was a particularly horrific spectacle. Cranmer was one of the thousands who watched as these once important and powerful men were publicly executed. Hugh Latimer, Bishop of Worcester, was a 70-year-old man. Nicholas Ridley, Bishop of London, was once Cranmer's own chaplain. As the flames took hold, Latimer leant over to Ridley and said, "Be of good comfort, Master Ridley, and play the man. We shall this day, by God's grace, light such a candle in England as I trust shall never be put out." Latimer died within minutes, but the fire on Ridley's side was weak. His death was slow and agonizing. Cranmer was horrified by what he'd seen, and so terrified of it happening to him that he abandoned the Protestant faith and became a Catholic. This normally meant that he would be spared, but he'd forgotten who he was dealing with. Bloody Mary burnt him anyway. On March 21st, 1556, he went into the fire. Cranmer held the hand which had signed his recantation into the flames so that it would burn first. Although people were used to the idea that heretics should burn, they'd never seen such important people executed in this way. They'd never seen persecution on this scale. Some people were brave enough to protest, and demonstrations broke out at the burnings and at church services. The people were turning against their queen. In private, they longed for her death and an end to the horror of the executions.